Hello, I'm Bookface, and welcome back to more Artbreeder stuff. Found out that this is actually a really popular series of mine. Who would have thunk it? So I'm here to talk about some more disturbing children, who I love very much. First we have Sangwi. Sangwi actually started out as a tapeworm, or at least I thought he was just a tapeworm. Actually, at first I just thought it was a little cramp in my stomach, but you know, stuff happens. A little time passed, I'm like, I think that's more than cramp. So I had to have Sangwi removed. But I'm like, hey, why does he look so sentient? A little more time passed. He's about the size of a horse now. He's a big old boy. He has a little mouth. You can kind of see a bit of it, but it's mostly closed, where it's kind of like a leech. And of course, he typically eats blood, but not of anything smaller than him, so it takes some big creatures to actually feed him. What I usually do is just to get a giant sack, like the size of a car, and just fill it with pineapple juice. That usually works. I'll just drain that till it's dry, and then it'll be good for a few months. It's a little bit of an effort, but it's worth it. Next we have Nombre de Caballo. A bit of a mouthful, but you know, he's worth it. He's fast. Like, not as fast as some of them, but he can outrun a car pretty easily. He makes a sound just like a horse. Well, I guess that's not entirely true. He makes a sound like someone very much trying to imitate a horse and doing a reasonably good job. But if you listen to it too closely, you're like, that's definitely not a horse. And that is sort of the thing to his whole appearance, even though looking at him head on, you're like, that's not a horse. But if you just like look at him real quick, you're like, hey, it's a horse. And then just slowly you're like, it's not a horse. He's typically pretty friendly, other than his staring habit. He does a lot. He stares directly at people, usually at their necks for some reason. It's a bit concerning, but don't worry, he's harmless, probably. Next we have Garebel. Garebel is kind of, I think he's a hippo. Like, obviously not a complete hippo, but I think he started out mostly as a hippo. But then he was like, I want to be a snail. And, you know, life finds a way. And somehow he became a really big snail. He's slowed down a lot, but I think he's just doing it on purpose. He makes this slime that's kind of acidic, but also if it doesn't break something down, like if it doesn't melt through a material, that material just starts floating like a balloon. It can take hours for it to come back down. Not really sure. It's like some weird liquid helium, and I'm not really sure why. But, you know, Garebel does as Garebel do. Next we got Gerald. Gerald is a finicky little boy. He's really tricky. I try, generally, you know, leash laws and stuff, to keep my children leashed. To keep my precious babies in safe conditions. Try to keep them somewhat locked down. Gerald doesn't like that. One time, in like a secure, watertight locked room, I forgot, a keyhole, and he slipped out of it. And like, he's about the size of a small dog, but somehow he's able to really squeeze in through basically anything, kind of like a squid. One time, tried to really lock him down. Turns out he can squeeze through dimensional rifts, too. You know, just hypothetical knowledge, of course, but, you know, it's strange. Next up, we got Shymoo. So, Shymoo swims backwards, because his face is actually on the left here. It's like a little duck. And he can quack much like a duck, except it's loud enough to shake the earth for about 10 miles. I nearly went deaf the first time he quacked. Thankfully, it's a bit muted in the water, but I think under the right, or rather under the wrong circumstances, that could probably cause a tidal wave. He's a bit sluggish in water, though interestingly enough, he gets faster in colder water. One time I swear I saw him swim through ice, which shouldn't be physically possible, but also I don't like putting limits on my children, so if he wants to swim through ice and he's not hurting anyone, by all means. We got he has a very strong bite. He's got no neck to speak of. The last vertebrae is actually connected to the skull, so it's really just his jaw. It's hard to see, but it actually kind of connects to the rib cage, so he can really open his mouth all the way down to his toes, basically. And it snaps closed like a bear trap. And let me tell you, if bites down on you, you are not getting loose unless he lets you go. He's very stocky. He can take like a shot from a tank and keep walking as if nothing happened. Ultimately a very intimidating combination, but he's just so sweet. Next we got Quarus. Quarus is very perceptive. His eyes, his nose, his ears, some other sense I'm not aware of. They are very adept. If you're invisible, he'll see you. If you're silent, he'll hear you. If you're clean, he'll smell you. He can jump about like 10, 20 feet in the air and almost always does like a couple front flips on the way down. He's a bit of a show off. Next we got Rochard. They, thank you very much, kind of are a giant duck, but also a dinosaur. Think like almost entirely the scale and shape of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but a duck. They can fly pretty quick, but considering how big they are, it's more just they can cover a big distance because they are a big distance. Their feathers can sort of grow indefinitely. One time I lost track of it and I realized, wait, that's not Rochard. That is a tiny fraction of its feathers and hair. It took a while to give them a haircut. Next we have Hey. So, Hey is really chill. He tends to say his name a lot. Actually, kind of all he says. He's a bit of a Pokemon. He's a little oblivious sometimes, which is part of the reason his name is Hey. And yeah, you have to say it like that, because otherwise he just won't respond to you. He can't go in water. He loves swimming in lava. Even though lava tends to be very loud, you can always hear his name if he's swimming in lava. I think it enhances his abilities. I'm pretty sure I've seen him dissolve into the lava and reappear other places, but I don't know, maybe I just wasn't paying that much attention. Next we got Schrunks. Schrunks is big. Now I've said that for a few. Schrunks, she's really big. So Schrunks is about a little bit larger than the sun. She's a good ways out. We don't get to visit her that much, unfortunately, but yeah, she just kind of floats around. She's one of the few of my creations that gives me grandchildren, because few planets started orbiting her, and so really all the life on those 5-6 planets, my grandchildren. I'm so proud. One of them built a death laser last week. A little less proud, but you know, kids will be kids. Schrunks can discipline them. Schrunks has like a little sort of whiskery mustache that can lash out like tentacles. When you have to discipline the grandchildren, it's very unfortunate, but Schrunks finds a way. Next, we got Stanford. He was writing these journals for a bit. At least I call them that. They were mostly just kind of his saliva on pages, but considering his saliva's ink, sometimes it said a word. Most of them were pretty obscene words, but I wasn't going to tell him that. Stanford actually has 6 toes, and not on one foot. He has 6 toes, period, throughout his whole body. Stanford loves to smile, and he can smile incredibly wide. Interestingly enough, it's not the bottom jaw that moves when he opens his mouth, it's his top jaw, which, you know, is connected to the skull. There's a unique hinge mechanism in the back that essentially works to where he can open the top of his mouth so much that the back of his head touches his lower back. So he's essentially all mouth in those situations. Next we got Ferber Starosta. They are a diva, which, you know, I can respect, but also they have this weird thing about height, and since they are mostly hair and organs, there's like a very thin layer of skin, like less than a millimeter. But because of this, they can stretch their body really high. I think it tops out at like 16 and a half feet. But, you know, they're always pushing the limits, how tall they can be. They've never shown any interest in fur coats and think they look gross. Has expressed an interest in flesh coats, which I guess is because it has fur, it just doesn't have flesh as much. And I've been putting off that request best I can. It's amazing how many excuses you can make. I'm running a little low though. Next we've got Scarantula. Scarantula is precious baby. Little larger than a bat. It likes to crawl on people's heads. It gives them a little lick every now and then. Kind of like a dog, except Scarantula has about 50, 100 tongues. It varies depending on the day. He tends to lay little eggs everywhere. Sometimes they're children, though usually they're not. And granted, they aren't necessarily his children. I'm pretty sure he hosts like a bunch of tiny spiders in his stomach, and somehow that allows him to lay those tiny spiders' eggs. So just like a million spiders might just burst out. But sometimes can make little egg-like structures that shoot essentially fireworks. They sting a little bit and leave minor chemical burns, but it's the thought that counts, right? Got Boof. Boof is a little bad about keeping quiet and staying in the shadows, despite the fact he wants to be a ninja. But for some reason, he's the animal that every child draws, probably because of his blocky head, which, you know, I respect immensely. He is an amazing hammer, and he loves to hammer. He can just headbutt things and boom, hammered in. But he really likes children. He likes to hang around children. He likes to be a muse for the children to draw. And everybody's like, why are you just drawing this blocky cow? That's not how you draw this. And then boof is just over in the corner all sad. Parents can be very critical of art sometimes. Never had that issue, but it sucks to see. Next we have Heeb. Heeb is a fun, tricky little guy. He's very comparable to a ferret and a sperm whale. He makes these sounds, but like if you mixed it with the chittering sound of a squirrel or a mouse. Interesting enough, can't swim, can fly. So it's interesting to watch him fly, mostly because he doesn't have wings. It's like he swims through the air. His tail actually has some sort of essentially a rocket fuel. And he can just fire himself forward like a missile if he's really in a rush. You know, Heeb always on that grind. I tell him to chill out, but I guess I'm a bit of a hypocrite with that. But I want my children to be better than I am. Next we have Bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is a real MVP. Obviously, I love all my children equally. I am not going to imply anything else. But Bourgeoisie, very good guy. He can roll into a ball, kind of like an armadillo. And when he's on all fours, he can run really fast, kind of like a wolf. Is similar to his stride. His body is part fungus, which actually means he can take some serious damage and just regrow. Technically speaking, his entire body could be almost completely destroyed, and he could regrow from one spore. It takes a very long time. I mean, it would take a very long time, hypothetically, but it is possible. And finally, we got that big old parrot beak, which can crunch through steel, titanium, diamonds, actually, but only once or twice. I think it's not his favorite. I think that's where the limit is coming in. But he's a real trooper. Bourgeoisie is wonderful, and he's a real team player. Next, we got Huntergo. Huntergo can turn invisible selectively, which is to say that he can become invisible but just to certain people, or rather only visible to certain people. He likes to go out and pretend to be somebody's imaginary friend. He's got some very fey aspects to him. He can just sort of float, disappear. He can talk, but without actually making any sound, but it seems like he's talking regularly. It doesn't seem like telepathy or whatever. His little tentacles can feel emotions, and I don't just mean that as, oh, he's empathetic. I mean that as, like, his tentacles can reach out, go into your brain, and just touch happiness or anger. And he's very good at flipping switches in people's brains. But I've told him that is very rude. Emotional states are hard to mess with, and you gotta be respectful. Sometimes people need to wallow in their suffering. Moving on. Next we got Cronkle. So Cronkle is a little bit crocodile, a little bit dog, and a good bit Komodo dragon. And that makes them extremely awesome in my book, and everyone's book. They're really fast. Like, could outrun a cheetah. Again, not the fastest of my children by far, but still pretty quick. Their jaws are very strong, also capable of crushing strong rock, granite, bedrock, stuff like that. Just a good companion. Good to fight, but also just real lapdog sometimes, which can be a little difficult because he weighs a lot. He's not that big. He's dense. He's very dense. And there's some number more of my Artbreeder children. It was nice coming back to this. Very, very relaxing. My mental state is a bit off right now, which, makes this perfect. I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, Artbreeder children. I'm glad more people are seeing these, and if you are seeing this, feel free to check out some of the other stuff I do, including specifically one that I'll recommend of when I've drawn some AI chimera with Google's Chimera Painter, because it's somewhat related. And I have some other AI art ideas coming up, but I'll save that for later. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!